All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Brahm, and this is my friend Cody. Welcome to everybody. The idea of this podcast is to create a space for the inner in a time so absent of life-affirming values, where the collective storytelling is so misinformed and divisive, and a sea of falsehoods is spread out upon the world. We are creating a circle of truth, speaking only from our direct inner experience and referencing the experiences of others that resonate as true for us. We believe storytelling is imperative for humans to develop in their understanding of what it means to be human and to thrive under any circumstances. Here we focus not on why is there a war in Ukraine, but rather why is there war? Not on why is this person our leader, but why do we have leaders? Not on blaming young people for not taking initiative in life, but in asking why the older generation has done such a poor job in preparing the young of the world for the world that surrounds them. In short, exploring the roots of our declining civilization and not just the symptoms. Our goal is to be listeners for each other, in a culture so saturated with undeveloped humans who need to clutch greedily to degrees and supposed expertises, and who jump like eager beagles to offer unasked for advice to fellow citizens, and feel a constant compulsion to excrete words. It is clear that the only way out of this rotten cul-de-sac the culture is trapped in will not come in the form of prescriptive advice giving. No one actually needs to be told anything. What they need is to be listened to deeply. And that is the thing that almost no one does or knows how to do. A circle of total respect must be formed between all of us, where we do not speak from conjecture or hearsay, but from the truth of our life's experience. And where we come to a place where we see we don't know the why of something, we say without shame that we do not know. This is not a place of answers, but a place of questions and of stories and an honest, sincere desire to share and explore the worlds of two beings and reflect on the wider world and life. We see there is no clearer sign that a civilization is on the wrong path than when the young decide to take their own lives. We see it is no sign of health when the vast majority of relationships are too brittle to stand up to a few words or a few actions. We see all leaders a reflection of the values of wherever the power lies in any situation. We see all wounds persist until brought to the light of inquiry and examination. We see these things will not go away on their own. This podcast is about having the courage to look into every darkness from the point of shadow and light where each of us is. This podcast is about exploring truth through dialogue.
Man, when I read that, I remember you sending that to me, and I read it, but it hits different when you listen to it, and I think that there's kind of a theme that what you read. There's an underlying theme that kept coming up was listening, and so I'm curious what do you feel like that exchange is when two people listen to each other, or when anyone listens, or maybe it's not with a human to human, maybe it's with the land.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. There's a phrase that's coming to me from, I think it was Michael Mead's book, the one about, the king, the archetypes of the mature masculine, where he says, in the old times when we had a king, a mythological king, or but the physical embodiment, the king is dead. That's a whole thing. We could go down on that. Like, no, we're done with kings. But he says you would go to the king, not to see the king, but to be seen by the king.
Yeah.
Someone who has experience, who has wisdom, presencing you, witnessing you, has a healing effect on you. And it's not even the words they say, but it's them being with you. And you can be in your drama. If the people around you go into your drama, that's one thing. If you go into your drama and someone is able to be solidly with you in that, then you can come out of the drama, and the drama doesn't spread. And then healing can happen. So I think listening, and there's a difference between listening and letting someone speak. And I think we have a culture, we don't really necessarily know how to listen. If I'm holding in my mind what I'm going to say when you stop talking, I'm not really listening. And so there's that allowing that risk of losing myself, and that when you stop talking, I kind of look stupid because I was really listening, and I don't know, and now I have to pause and find me again. It's a whole experience. It's a trip, and we don't have a training in it. We don't have a series of role models in it. We don't necessarily have the experience of how powerful that is. Well, I can remember one person in my life who was there with me in that capacity. That changed my life. That gave me my life, And so I realized the power of it because I've tasted it firsthand. And so that's given me this desire to want to offer that to other people. And the transformation from before that and after that, having that one person in my life who did that for me, it's powerful.
I think that's so funny. As you're explaining that whole thing, I was thinking about, I was like taking note, right? I'm like cataloging, like, oh, that's an interesting response. Okay, I'm gonna say this, when the it's the discourse has shifted and stuff. And then as soon as you said that, I was just like, oh, damn it, I'm doing it, right? I'm not listening. And I think that there's something that is such a powerful phrase, right? Like letting someone speak, which is not the same as listening. I think really the foundation, the core of listening is presence, right? It's just you allowing that person to be, to exist separate from the drama of their story. You're not taking in the drama of their story. You're just whatever they need reflected, you just are for them. That's like ultimate listening in some way. And I think that's why we are attracted to quiet spaces in the land, because the land, that's what it does. It just reflects, being, but in a lot of ways, I think in the most, traumatic points in my life, I find myself by water because it reflects, right? That's really interesting. I haven't really spoken that out until this moment, but it's just fascinating.
On that note, should we segue into sharing a little bit about our stories? Do you want to go first?
I can go first. So I'm a clinical herbalist and spagurist. I utilize alchemy within Spagyria. I don't like to call myself an alchemist because I don't think I practice as much alchemy to really take that title, but I'm a clinical herbalist. I work for the Colorado School of Clinical Herbalism, where I teach classes there. I work a lot with the online program with a cohort of students. And I'm an educator, I'm a medicine maker. I'm working so hard to get my own clinical practice going. And I'm a storyteller, I'm a collector of stories. interested in myth and the medicine of myth and the psychological analysis that is embedded within myth. Very fascinated with that. But yeah, that's who I am. My name's Cody. I don't know if we said that yet, but
and you mentioned this word spagyria. At some point, we'll have to say what that means.
Yeah. So spagyria, I'll give the elevator pitch because it is. I mean, that's a different podcast, right? That's like a whole different thing. But spagyria was coined that word from Paracelsus, who was a 16th century alchemist. And spagyria is a medical philosophy that was born out of the alchemic modality in cosmology. It has deep roots within Hermeticism, and during the 16th century, Paracelsus utilized what he learned from Galenic medicine in Avicenna and kind of utilized energetic medicine with Hermetic medicine and created this whole kind of cosmology of spagyria. It is a medicine making pathway, so for any herbalists that are listening to this, it's easy to kind of pivot from what you know within Western herbalism to start creating a spagyric pharmacopoeia. It does have its own diagnostic tools, which Paracelsus coined as the entia of diseases. There's about 5 of them. And then a specific pharmacopoeia to use as therapeutics for those specific entias of diseases.
And then entia, what would that be?
So entia is the plural form of ens, which ens is, so there's like about 5 of them, right? There's like ens naturale or ens astrale or ens dei. And ens naturale is really easy to talk about because it really works on the physical dimension. Ens naturale would be diseases corresponding to natural causes. So that could mean you have a cold from a virus, right? That's ens naturale. There's a little mixing of the ends or the entias that come into play there, but nutritional deficiencies that would correspond to ens naturale as well. And so in order to kind of use these items of pharmacopoeia for ens naturale, very similar to Western herbalism, you would take in the account of the constitution of the individual, and then create a formula that would match the symptom picture, understanding what the root cause of those symptoms are coming from, and then balancing that with formulas that would match with the individual's constitution, and then nutritional repletion if the individual is deficient.
Yeah, I think for me a turning point kind of in a relationship with alchemy was through Carl Jung. Mm-hmm. It was just something that you're 11 and you read Harry Potter and you're like, oh, the Philosopher's Stone and all this kind of stuff, and then the culture just poo-poos it all down the line, that it's just and then maybe you read that there were some famous scientists who were into alchemy also, but the culture hasn't shed a light on it other than it's just kind of tomfoolery. But Carl Jung, and he speaks to it also, that he had this idea that it was just just quackery, etc. But then, in his own experiences and reading and getting deeper into it, he was like, oh no, this is like symbology of the inner, that transformation of the gold, the lead, that's working with our shadow elements. That's, a language that they could use and not get burned at the stake, and there's loads in there too. And I think for myself, it's helpful, and I know very little about it, but just these two concepts of like solve and coagula, solve dissolving, things breaking apart, coagula, things coming together, has been really helpful. There's Alan Moore, who did The Watchmen, he wrote a lot of things, brilliant mind philosopher. This is kind of how he was analyzing society and culture, and just pointing to how much salve we've had of just dissolving everything, all the religious traditions, all of the, kind of spiritual paths of just all across the board, dismantling, breaking apart, taking down, and kind of saying no, 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 no. And in his analysis, he was saying, we're about time for some coagula coming together, reuniting those things. T.S. Eliot, The Wasteland, he's talking about all the fractured religious traditions, how they're broken. They don't work for most people. They don't work. For a lot of young people, they don't speak to the living kind of spirit of young people. And then a lot of us just don't look for any kind of a spiritual path. It all just seems like hogwash. It all just seems like a con job. And then we live our lives in the world without a connection, religion, religio, a connecting back to whatever truth is, whatever, deeper ultimate reality might be, or even just the exploration of those things. And the imagery in alchemy definitely has captured my imagination. I have no idea what it means, but just seeing the images, this one image of a green lion who is biting the sun, and the sun is bleeding. No idea what that means, but it speaks to me. It's kind of like, whoa.
It's such a... I love that you bring all that up. I mean, the green line is representation of the vitriol, right? And so the imagery that is... So it's actually really fascinating, is because alchemists in the 16th centuries, they didn't have PowerPoints, right? So like, how the heck can we get our points across? How can we describe what we're understanding in the lab to people? And so like this, they come up with these really imaginary themes of like a green lion biting the sun and dripping red, right? What that's corresponding to is vitriol, a solvent, is dissolving a substance to release the sulfur, right? The red is acting as the sulfur, and the sulfur corresponds to the soul. And so what you're saying is, as salvo et coagula, there's another, the word spagyria. Spagyria means spao and agero, which means to break apart, to separate, and then recombine. And again, it kind of adds into this salvo et coagula theory. And really, alchemy is a procedure. And that's what the Emerald Tablet is all about. The Emerald Tablet is like an instructional manual, essentially. And you can overlay the instructions, you can overlay the procedures on a multi-dimensional plane. And that's what alchemy does, or rather spagyria, is when we take a plant, we separate the three aspects of the plant out. The salt, which is the body, sulfur, which is the soul, and mercury, which is the spirit. You can do that multi-dimensionally. So you can do that on the body, right? On the physical plane, on the salt. You can separate all those aspects on the physical plane. Or you can dig into the soul and separate all of those three aspects on the soul's plane, or into the spirit. And so alchemy, utilizing those procedures, is a spiritual pathway. It's the fundamental spiritual pathway of Western culture. And it dates back all the way to Egypt, so it's not necessarily Western, but it is the pathway that the Western mind kind of took and ran with, that Eastern philosophies kind of went more internal. Because you see, this whole lab work is actually like real stuff. Jung kind of analyzed it from a psychological perspective, but alchemists were in their labs running the procedures outlined in the Emerald Tablet to find divinity. Utilizing all of their special equipment is a microcosm of the soul's journey. And I love it so much. I think it is such a fascinating thing, and it's so alive. Every single moment of our days, we are applying the procedures written in the Emerald Tablet without even knowing it. We're just solve et coagula all the time. And it's only when you can kind of understand it and align yourself with the specific procedures, then you can perfect it, right? Then you can make crystals, you can make the stones, then you can make the essence of immortality, and all these different therapeutics that are within reach, really.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely have to do like a whole episode at some point, just doing a deep dive on this. But just for the intro part, like maybe you could just say like how you first found alchemy or how it first became alive to you.
Yeah, really, it was through herbalism. I, just got into herbalism, and I really love stories. I'm an avid fantasy nerd. I love wizards and potions and all this stuff. Like, that's like really where my child lights up and smiles, just like you. It's like you read Harry Potter and it's like, he's in the abandoned library and he's, looking at Nicholas Flamel's old journal and stuff. But then you realize that that's an actual person, that person's real. As the story goes. But, and so like there's always been that in the back of my mind, that fascination. And as I continued through herbalism, I just I think all herbalists eventually hear the word spagyria, or spagyrics is probably their first introduction. And I just immediately, it was just like my soul lit up and I was like, I have to go down this pathway. I think I was bothered that when I did make medicine, I wasn't utilizing every aspect of the plant. In regular herbalism, you kind of discard the body of the plant, but in spagyria, you burn it to ash and you collect the ash and you leach its minerals from it. You recrystallize those minerals and purify them, and then put them back into the soul and the spirit of the medicine that you've made. And that really turned me on. I was like, wow, that's really cool. But it's just like surface level. And then you go a little step underneath it and you're just like, it blows your mind, because it's like these are philosophies and anecdotes on really how to purify your mind, how to purify your body, how to purify your soul. And so it no longer to me became this cute little edge that I got as an herbalist, that I was kind of doing things a little differently. That rebel part of me enjoyed that, but it became a spiritual pathway that I could really start stepping on, and it just meant a lot to me. So that's kind of how I got into it.
Nice one, nice. Anything else to add before we flip, and then we can always deep dive and get back around?
No, let's hear about Brahm.
All right. Well, so my name's Brahm, and I, for the last 7-8 years now, I've been getting into permaculture, into syntropic agroforestry, agroecology, all these terms that basically just mean working with the land, working with plants, helping to create community through helping to connect people back to nature. So there's a nonprofit that I helped to run up in upstate New York, and I've been with them for 4 years now, and we work with people from all around the world, all around the country, young people who, they came out of university and they're looking around, and it's kind of bleak, if your heart wants something and the world just is not opening up to that. Where do you go? You either put yourself into the boxes that are there, or you find places that are a little bit on the margins of the alternative. So the whole idea of the nonprofits, the Center for Regenerative Ecology, Education, and Enterprise Development, it's for people who have a vision and would like the support to put that into practice that's in some way related with human well-being. It's related with connecting with nature. It's related with connecting with our hearts and the path that um, is deeply right for us, and bringing that forward in the world, and not giving up on our dreams, and not saying just because I don't see where this can manifest, therefore I won't even try. I mean, I grew up in a context of basically unschooling. We had a large amount of different families in central Massachusetts, and we just invented the days together. We would go to the post office en masse, all ages, 5 years old with 11 years old with, all ages, and we would see how they would send the packages around. We would go to the water filtration plant. We would do swimming classes and yoga classes and chess clubs and book clubs and cooking clubs and all this kind of stuff, just inventing life, play, running around in the woods, and there was no 9 o'clock Monday morning, ring the bell, all this kind of stuff. Academics are very easy to learn if you're not in a state of resistance. And you need to be in a state of resistance if you're in, doesn't matter, public, private, any kind of institution. The main lesson is somebody's up front and they have the power, and everyone else sits down and doesn't have the power. Then you go in the workforce and there's a boss who has the power, and then everyone else doesn't have the power. So it's a very strange way of coming into the world and being in the world. And I had friends who did go to school and I had friends who didn't go to school. And I saw the changes and the differences marked, especially as people go through puberty, they go through, and you take the child who wants to know about anything. Why is the sky blue? All this stuff. And then, most of my friends were just dressing in black and everything was dark and everything was bad, and just the amount of just violence that people absorb, whether it be physical or verbal or on any different level, just not being seen, not being heard, not being valued, not being respected. That shifts the whole culture, when you have people who come through that and they don't have the foundation of seeing their own value, and it's really important that we have our value mirrored back to us. We need that. We need that presence, we need that care, we need that love, ultimately. We need that presence. And if we don't get that, it's very hard to stand authentically in a place where we are able to care for others, where we are able to respect others. If we haven't been able to develop that respect for ourselves, it's very hard to be in the world in a way that helps us be of help to others, right? And so, having come through that way, the dominant philosophy was, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. So what do you want to do? Just because you're 6 or 8 or 12, I'm respecting your integrity, I'm respecting your intelligence, and so we live up to that expectation. And it's the difference between if someone's always hounding you to do your homework, they say, hey, this is your life, is this going to help you? All right, so how do you want to do it? And you engage in dialogue. You don't just see something in a movie and tell your children, that's bad, that's wrong, don't ever do that. You say, well, wow, what did you notice in that? You have a dialogue. And so you come into the world where you are respected. The young life is the fresh life. And if we know we have a dying machine of a system, it's the new life that can give us a fresh perspective. And it's essential that we are welcoming that new life into the world with respect, with love, with kindness, and not trying to put it into the box of the dying machine. I mean, you can go to Asia and you can see square watermelons because they'll stack on the shelf. It's efficient. I mean, that's how I see most of the schooling in the West. It's just put the mind in a little box. And a lot of people break out. Maybe most people do break out. But there's damage that's done there that I'm trying to figure out the best ways I can to help people see other ways of doing things, because I did not come through those systems. So I did not go into crazy debt for education, and that's allowed me to spend these last 10, 12, 13, 14 years living in other countries, first teaching English and learning the languages, that's a whole rabbit hole we can get. Just how much having another language in your head cuts down your own mental suffering. If you make yourself think in another language, well, it's work to repeat that story of, oh, and that thing and that. You screen out a whole lot of mental suffering just by putting another language in there that's a little bit more work for you to go through, and you're just more mindful of the thoughts as they're arising, you know?
That's really interesting. I think I'd love for you to speak on that a little more. Yeah. Another question I'd like to ask you is, what is it about connecting with the land, working within permaculture, and teaching people permaculture and building systems? What is it about that particular work that captured you? But I'd love to know about this reducing mental suffering first. Yeah.
Sure. Okay, if you'd like to do that first, we'll do that first.
Yeah.
Well, so language was always a really important part of my education growing up. My mother studied early childhood development, and from what she understood from that, music and languages were what helped to develop the brain, connect the synapses, all that kind of stuff, to like the furthest degree, in a simple way. So I learned German, my siblings and I, we learned German at like 3, and mostly absorbed it kind of like how I absorbed English, just playing with neighbors. I had neighbors who, the mother was from Germany, and so she was raising her kids bilingual. And so we would just have little play groups, and we would read books in German, we would do German, we just lived in German in that context. Just got it like that. And we kind of weren't allowed to watch movies unless they were in German, by and large, So it was how we did it. It was just, okay, now we're doing German, now we're doing it. And so I think that helped kind of open the door there and just showed me the value of it. Later when I was learning Spanish when I was 16. It's like, all right, I want to master this language. I mean, it's such a useful language. And it wasn't until later, and I was getting deeper and deeper into meditation at that point too, and really trying to be more mindful of what my mind was doing. I mean, I spent 5 years really dealing with some intense insomnia from like 11 to 16. And it wasn't until starting to do some basic meditation, just bring the mind to the breath, gets distracted, bring it back all night long, if the mind is just racing, sleeping 2-3 hours a night, broken up in 15 minutes here, hours go by. I mean, it's kind of hell,
Yeah.
The mind was just racing. So at a certain point, I had to kind of turn the lens inward and say, what is going on with my mind, And so it was at that same time I was diving into Spanish. And when I made that shift to start to think in Spanish, I realized, wow, my experience of my own mind is so different because I'm just going with simple, just trying to simplify completely everything I want to express. And just noticing the difference between just the way emotions kind of hide behind each other. Behind anger, they could be sadness, or they could be a lot of different things, fear. Just noticing that behind thoughts too, and just, why am I bearing out this repeated story of 10 years ago or 5 years ago? It has no place. I don't need it, and now I'm making myself do it through Spanish. It's too much work. I just give up most of that stuff,
That is so interesting. So you literally have a limited amount of words to come up with the expression. So you're only given like 4 colors, and it's like, all right, you gotta make this whole elaborate, complex thought form, and you just can't. And so it's almost like you are stuck in beginner's mind because you're there at the beginning, right? Wow, that's really sweet. That's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth it. I won't go on about it, but it's worth learning a language just for the existential factor of it. You will break through a lot of like your hang-ups, whatever they are, because the language, the way I think of it is every language has a shape. like a beaker, you know, like a glass jar, and we're in an alchemical lab. This is a perfect example. You know, it's like we were a baby that had no words. It was just a cloud of intelligence that took on words, you know, and then the shape of this language is limiting in this way. The shape of this other language is limiting in this other way. The jars are different. That smoke, that intelligence that we are, shifts and takes on the form and the limits of the language. So then when you have 2 or 3 or 6 or 7, you can see where all the limits are, and then you can bring in the expand. Like an example, like in English, right now we could say we are spending time together. Like it were a commodity that at the end we've spent the time and now we're impoverished. It's gone, the time's gone. In Spanish, compartimos tiempo. We are sharing time together. It's a completely different paradigm.
Yeah.
And you can take that. Now, when I say that in English, I say, it was nice to share time with you. It's not the standard way. So my English is strange and go through different grammatical structures.
Yeah.
But it feels more whole and authentic based on the perspectives that I've gathered from those different languages.
I love that. You know, this morning we were listening to that lecture, what was it?
Oh, yeah, the biogeometry. The Egyptian biogeometry.
And in a way, that's kind of what you're describing, where each language has this shape. And that shape is going to be the foundational blueprint of how your reality is created. And so, like, we're in the shape of our reality right now is the English shape, right? And like you said, it's like, it's very transactional, right? It's a language of commerce. So it's like we are, you know, some type of transaction is occurring in this room, just based off of the form and the structure of the words themselves.
Yeah. Wittgenstein said, the philosopher, reality is a shadow cast by grammar. Which you don't have to dwell on, but just how things are language. Like in English, I'm sorry is something we use so much, and it's not authentic. It doesn't make any sense in so many contexts. You know, somebody dies, oh, I'm so sorry. Doesn't make any sense. Literally, it makes no sense. In Spanish, lo siento means I feel that. That's different.
Yeah.
You know, in Irish Gaelic, you say tabran orm, which means there's a sadness with me. Now, that might not be authentic in that situation either, but it's a different way of approaching it. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. What does it mean? It doesn't mean anything. And to remember that English is such a colonized language, and it's a language that kind of in a way feels bad about itself in fear. If we do plants or medicine, it's in Latin, that Latin is the intellectual, or Greek, where, you know, now we're up here. English is just it's a strange thing.
Yeah.
It's a strange thing.
Yeah.
But we can do a deep dive later on. But your other question about, you know, helping people connect with the land. I mean, this. It's the best way I can find to help people find a connection with life beyond, you know, the material. You know, our culture has just gone so far into the material, just nothing else. So get as much as you can. We'll raise people up from just living in abject poverty. And, you know, I had a geography teacher who said, if you can turn a tap and have clean, drinkable water, your level of wealth is so far beyond most people in this world. Like, how can you not just spend your whole day in gratitude? If you have a mattress to sleep on, how can you not just spend your day in gratitude? And most people are living in a totally different reality on that. And so we're surrounded by the material, and we're surrounded by spiritual traditions and religious traditions that are not feeling alive to most of us. Most young people don't go to church, you know, and there's not necessarily this feeling that there is anything there to explore in that tradition or in any of the traditions. So it's like we've closed the door to something. Why is it that we have more material than anyone, you know, and yet depression is so high, suicidality is so high, the increasingly more self-destructive ways people go into to try to just be okay, just get through the day, you know. It's the lack of thriving is so vast and so apparent when you have come from a context of feeling deep friendship, feeling deep connection, and then you come out and you say, this is such an inhuman situation that we're in. How can anybody breathe in this? How can anyone stand it?
Right.
And if you don't have another point of reference, all right, you just say, this is life. If you do, you just say, oh my goodness, like, hold on, how do I show people what I've experienced? You know? And so not trying to do that through spirit or spiritual words, but through nature, and connecting people with nature, just getting their hands in the dirt, just getting them to plant a tree, just getting them out and about, you know. And we don't have to dive into all the studies about how good that is for our well-being, and that, I mean, the evidence is out there, you know, in people's experience of just walking in the woods. You don't see people raging in the woods, you know, in the traffic, the trees calm us, you know, however you want to put words to your experience. That's something that's immediate. You don't have to believe anything. It's just right there, you know. And I'm just coming back from New Zealand, where the Maori people, they have this concept. They call themselves the Whenua, the people of the land. And they say we cannot heal as a person or as a people unless we heal our relationship with the land around us, and heal the land around us. If we're in the city, nobody considers the land, the pavement. What is there to connect to?
Sure.
But we run around to yoga classes and this, that, heal me, heal me, heal me. We don't have this concept. What is our right relation with the land? You know? Was a stolen land. We've never made that right. And I'm not saying wait for governments to kind of make that right. In your own heart, you can start to do that work.
Right.
You can start to deepen your connection with whatever land around you feels alive, and just to consider that that's a piece, that you're a part of the land, and that your healing is going to be dependent on your environment, your ecology, your ecosystem, and to consider that that's, you know, the Maori have this notion of guardianship, that we, you know, we can be forces of such tremendous good and positivity when we know how to be in right relation with the land, and we know how to steward and tend. It's very empowering. You know, I think a lot of people, the depression of young people in great part is in seeing or feeling that the leadership, the older generations, are not willing or not skilled or not capable or not interested in actually being part of the solution, you know? If you know plastic is not good, stop making the plastic bags. It's not rocket science, you know? Yeah. And so the older generation in part has not transmitted the necessary skills to the young people so that they can go out, you know. My friend Jake Wyatt and I in New Zealand, we planted 200 trees in one day. One day we planted 2. And my friend Sam Parker Davies in Australia, he planted 20,000 trees in a day with friends and an excavator, and just digging trenches and then just going down and just really being gung-ho about it. Like, we can do a tremendous amount of work in a very small amount of time, but we have to realize that we're capable, you know? And so kind of being a facilitator in that light, helping to connect people in that light, it feels like the best thing that I can do to be part of that solution of just showing people they're powerful. They are part of the world. They are nature, you know? We have to remember that. And that what, you know, it's such a mysterious thing to be a human being, and we can take our point of reference from anything. If we take it from civilization and the news and social media, depression is natural. Yeah. We can just as easily take it from the natural world. You know, you cut that mint back 1,000 times, it's going to grow back every single time. It wants to live. A plant says yes to life 1,000%. You know, and we can mirror that. That can be our way of being.
Yeah, we can learn. We can learn from it. I think that's something that's been so fascinating with my work in herbalism is learning how to be human. You introduced this understanding of rewilding yourself, and that is really, I think, at the core of your work and in a big part of my work. Like, and in a lot of ways, they hold hands because you are stewarding, you're understanding right relationship with the land. If I go out into the land and I find a lovely patch of whatever plant that I want to harvest, if I take too much, then that land can't give back to me that medicine. And so it teaches you how to be a human, how to be a right human, authentic human, and a respectful human, so that you can be part of it, right? It wants you to be part of nature again, and it just offers it over and over and over again, unwillingly. It's like the most unconditionally loving experience that we have. And I think that's why we refer to it as mother, right? Mother Nature, because it is so unconditionally loving to us. All the destructive fires and putting concrete over everything, it'll find a way to show itself even through the cracks, And I love this understanding of, like, with a world full of wounds, you can always heal just by putting your hands in the dirt. I love that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and just seeing the diversity, seeing all these plants working together in harmony on all these different layers, and just that it's not competition, it's harmony, it's balance, and that we can come into balance. I'm glad you brought up rewilding. Yeah, the physical act of rewilding is planting loads of trees, the natives, and getting the forests coming back. And then the inner work of rewilding is, through our lives, so many concepts have been thrown at us, we've put things on, and rewilding is taking all of it off, going into the wild, inside, you take everything off, and then one by one you can look at them and say, all right, this I do accept, this I don't accept, this I am not. And you're not going around holding on to things that someone told you were 20 years ago, and it actually is not the case. Yes. And that's essential. And in the philosophy of rewilding, we're not going to live to see all these trees. Sometimes it takes 50 years for but that's not the point. The point is, what rewilding does is it asks us to open a door in our mind to the possibility that a bright future for humans is possible if we learn from nature and if we come into alignment with nature. And that is such a hard door for people to open.
It's a big door. It's heavy, right? It's a lot of big strength to open that door.
But just acknowledging it is the first step. Just acknowledging, oh, I see. For me, by fire or ice, I think we're gonna go. All right, that's my thing to work with. Like, can I come back to that door, and one day do I open it a crack to see the bright light coming through the other side?
Yeah. I love that you literally just described Spagyria, but you did it in this your own framing. You described it in three forms, rewilding in three forms: the physical aspect, the soul's aspect, and then this overlaying spiritual aspect. And yeah, this understanding of going through this internal landscape of yours and separating everything out, laying everything out, and then purifying them, and then bringing them together. And I don't know if it's possible to do that without a connection to nature. That's what I'm learning. That's how it feels for me. I can't speak for everybody because there's a lot of people on the planet, but that's certainly how it feels. Is that it's just really hard to do without the teachings that come along with nature. I think it's just crucial.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, to have that framework, and to realize, the world is not the planet. The planet is all the physical things.
Yeah.
And so this idea, this fixation we have that, everything's got to shift or to change. It's not the physical, it's the world, which is the ideas, that's a desk, this is a chair. Where's the economy? It's an idea, it's a computer, it's a blender. Where's the political structure? It's an idea. And we can shift all those things, and it's just that realization that where there's 2 of us or where there's 10 of us, we can decide how we want to do life. And just the bigger structure, idea-based structures that the society is clinging to are not working. The heart just shrivels up and dies in that kind of a wasteland situation. And so we don't have to have any big physical upheavals to change it. It's just literally changing our minds.
First law of hermetics, all is mind, right? It's interesting how difficult it is. Because even when you show someone the way, like you read that in a book, or all the Eastern philosophy, it speaks about pretty much the same thing, where it's just like, oh, you just have to change your relationship with your consciousness, with the mind. You just have to maybe shift your perspective in that angle, or shift it over there. But it's so impossible. There's just so much depth that's involved, whether that's like ancestral, trauma that's like kind of, pushing its weight onto that, or maybe it's societal trauma that's pushing its weight on that, and you quickly feel really claustrophobic, and you quickly just kind of submit into routine of your day-to-day life. Curious how, what are teachings, what are ways that you break up that claustrophobic sensation?
Yeah, good question. I think for one thing, for me, the meditation aspect was really helpful. Just coming back to the breath, noting, oh, anger, oh, hungry, oh, boring, oh, this is stupid, oh, just realizing what our minds are doing, and realizing how much of it is just really unhelpful. Like when I was building a house with my father, I remember just distinctly just turning off thought because it just wasn't helpful.
Yeah.
Just like, I'm hammering, and all the thoughts were just, oh, that went in crooked, oh no, my dad's gonna be upset about this, oh no, I'm fucking that up. Like literally, I just was there just watching my thoughts, just like, 0 of these thoughts is helping me do this better. I would do much better if I turned off all thought just by focusing all my attention on just hammering in. I would do way better. So then I just kick the thoughts out, but I think, I was 16 before I started any of that stuff. I had no idea what my mind was doing. I had no idea I was stressed out. I had no idea what I was thinking, It was like the eye was always pointed outward, and then it was just the world, and it was just, all right, because of that.
Right.
Wait a minute, okay, what's going on here? I'm the one that's not sleeping. I'm the one that's got the issue. Let me think about that. Let me work on that, And that was a really helpful starting point of just seeing myself in a different light. I had so much anger, just so much anger. And it shifted through years of just paying attention. All right, I'm angry. All right, there's the anger. And just noticing as it comes up and not falling into it. And then gaining, okay, oh, I feel like saying this, instead of just I say it, and getting that space, that little bit of space, and oh, I have choice. Oh, now I can just be in silence. Or now, is there anything else I can think of? No, I can't. I remove myself from the situation, and just noticing how I could shift my behaviors and not be reactive. Just having that direct experience of, don't need to believe anything. I don't need to just see, like, oh, if I pause and notice what's going on with me, I have more freedom of choice, of action.
Right. Yeah. I love that. I think that those methods and tools are so useful And something I wish that, I mean, imagine if they did that in public school, right? Imagine if we like taught these lessons to individuals in elementary school. I also think that it would be incredible to see, spaces. Like right now we're in a space and it's just like whatever is whatever, right? This is a very free, open, safe space. And I think that, you're touching on this concept of anger, where it's just like anger is, there's utility in that, right? There's something that can be useful if given the correct context. And I think that it's entirely possible to create spaces for individuals to express their collective grief or collective anger and do it in a safe way where it can be transmuted, right? We can move from a space of anger into a space of like action, right? Maybe that action that can be multifaceted, right? You can express that in so many different ways. But I think that's something that turned me on so much about Robert Blythe's the Minnesota Men's Conference is it was inspiring to see a group of men get together and listen to fairy tales, right? Like that is, and these men were like Midwest hardened, pissed off men, right? And they're just angry and frustrated about something, and you get them together and they're just listening to fairy tales. And you quickly go from a space where like I'm a man and I'm angry into a boy who's just listening to a fairy tale. And that is interesting. I wish that we had more outlets in spaces like that. I think it's common which is great for women to have a lot of circles. And I see it, maybe there's some disparity between men in having circles. Maybe I just haven't found them yet. But I do see not a lot of men getting together and just like, shit, are we angry? Hell yeah. Are we sad? Yeah, that's okay too.
Yeah. Tell us more about that. I mean, thanks to you, I started getting to Robert Bly, and that work was really, really important for me, and just amazingly beautiful to see those circles and to hear the poetry and feel those transformations. Like, what more can you tell us about kind of how you got into that, or what you saw about that, or how we could have more of that?
It was absolute luck. I mean, I have a deep, deep fascination with story and myth, and it's I'm such an avid fantasy reader, and I kind of trailed this idea, this thought of like, wow, I can feel like I can be a better person, or maybe I can feel like I can handle a situation better when I embody these characters in these books. And that there's psychology in there. There's deep, deep psychology in there that's just like, it comes back to Joseph Campbell. It's like these characters live inside you. These characters are manifestations of your soul, and these archetypes can be heightened or deficient in context. And I think I was just kind of on YouTube one day, and I just stumbled upon the Minnesota Men's Conference. I had no idea who Robert Bly was. I had no idea who Malidoma Somé was, or Michael Mead, or Martin Shaw, or James Hillman. I had no idea who any of these men were, but I was fascinated by the fairy tales. And I was just like, man, I love the fact that I can go about in my monotonous job and be swept off into this imaginable realm. But at the end, when the story concludes, there's a discussion about it. And that was new to me, because at that time, I'm quietly reading these books to myself. But in the context of the Minnesota Men's Conference, they spoke as if story was this alive thing. It was a being, and it came into the room and it made a ruckus and it flipped tables and it held you and it, you know, nurtured you and it riled you up, and then when it was done doing its thing, it kind of waited for you to say thank you almost, right? In whatever capacity that you could. That was really new to me. And so when they started just having this discussion about like, man, I was there when that in that scene, or that color really stood out to me, or, you know, when the you know, Yvonne took the Firebird from the cage, I felt that, you know, and I quickly started kind of linking these ideas between like, oh my God, like story is in myth is just so much bigger. And so I just devoured every little bit, and I started getting into Bly's poetry and Hillman's psychological work, and Martin Shaw's ability to tell story, and it just fascinated me. And it really kind of positioned me towards a trajectory of yearning to find spaces like that, but it also left me with sorrow when I was unable to find spaces like that. Or maybe I found spaces like that and felt like they were maybe a little disingenuous, or maybe a little performative, or maybe this, and you know, and that's partially probably on my doing and not fully kind of trying to integrate into those spaces. But yeah, just really fascinated by the power of myth and its ability to shape reality. I think that myth, and curious what your thoughts, like what is myth, right? What is that? And I think it's the essence and the truth of a landscape. You know, we just were talking about land and how land in relationship with it can heal you. And in a way, myth is the truth and the context of the land in one moment and in all moments. And by touching it and by allowing it to come into you, you get to experience, you get to connect with the land, really, through this imaginable, very personal, vulnerable space.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. I mean, Joseph Campbell, and literally that show, The Power of Myth,
Yes.
with Bill Moyers, that changed my life. Hearing his voice and just hearing what was transmitted through his voice. You know, I remember being around 16 years old and just thinking, whoa, I want some of what he's got, you know? And it was a first for me. You know, I couldn't think of anyone else in the culture who spoke to me like that, or was a role model that I could kind of base my life on. And I think for me, myth is that. Myth gives us like stars on the horizon that we can tie our lives to, that we can follow, and we can have lives of value and of valor. And it would have been impossible for me to go at 21 to China, not knowing the language, not knowing anyone, and to have taught 550 students English that I've never done before. They didn't have any curriculum. They gave me 2 books, and none of the students had the books. I had to improvise everything, you know, create a whole curriculum. It was only possible because I had that mythic framework. That hero's journey was just embedded in my heart, you know, and you know, and I had living models too. This Bjork, you know, was like one of my heroes. You know, how's this person, you know, make a life, and she's just imbued with the myths, you know, and you see the way she presents and her music and the way she's able to collaborate with so many people, you know. She was like my living hero of just like how, okay, this person is living life on this level. It's like that disconnection you feel as you're a child and you have an imagination, you go around, at a certain point you look around and you're like, wait, when did everyone pretend they don't have an imagination anymore?
Right.
When did everyone pretend like they don't want to play anymore? What happened to all the fun of the world?
Yes.
You look around and you're just like, this is very strange. And then you see examples in myth, or you see examples, from these rare individuals who haven't closed the door to the heart's yearning, the dream of our hearts. And they're living out, they're finding a way to do that, and it's a vital life that vitalizes. And Joseph Campbell was such a bright light, such a vital voice. I just started reading all of his work, and then everyone that he was getting into Jung, getting into Nietzsche, and these people were speaking to me so deeply. And Jung, at a certain moment, he says it was imperative for him to ask himself and to find the answer to, what is the myth of my life? What is the myth that I'm living out unconsciously? I need to make that conscious. We're all living on certain patterns or programs, etc. And so reflecting on that, and reflecting on kind of what stories have kind of hit me the hardest. I mean, honestly, it's the story of Parzival, even all these years later. The fool of, King Arthur's knights, who he wins the world by not knowing that it's impossible. He instantly gets transported to the Grail Castle, and as he's there with the Fisherman King, who has the wound that will never heal, he is not yet ready to do what is necessary, and he's still bound by the culture, and the culture of the time is what we're dealing with now. The wasteland, that mythological metaphor, is the metaphor that we're living. We look at this culture, it's a culture that's a void, it's a vacuum. We throw off traditions, every 10 years we burn everything, or every year, every month, and we're accelerating that process. It's the void, it's a wasteland. But you need to have some fertile ground that you put your feet in, so that you don't just shrivel up, your heart doesn't shrivel up, and so the rules of that time were, you do not acknowledge another person's suffering, because you will shame them, and you will shame yourself, and you'll shame everyone. So he doesn't acknowledge the suffering of this king, and he's instantly thrown out of the castle, and he has to go around and around and around, and finally years later he makes it back, and then he does acknowledge the suffering of the other. And that's where, the Grail as the mystery of ourself. It's not an outer thing, it's an inner journey, right? And that's the way I read that in Joseph Campbell, etc. And that myth is so powerful for me. I knew nothing about traveling. I was so pathetic, so helpless. It's like going to China and not knowing that, I didn't have a smartphone. I was just bumbling around, no one spoke English. Or find a hotel, paying crazy too much money, and just not knowing how to do it, and all this kind of stuff. I stayed in China for 5 months. What did I see? I saw almost nothing. I was just isolated in my house, and I was learning German as I was teaching them, and the culture was really closed, and so I didn't know how to make friends. I had friends, so I didn't know how to make friends, and so it was just the myths that were allowing me to I couldn't have functioned in that kind of, it was just too hard, but the mythic outline of just greatness is possible. There's so much we're capable of. Having that versus not having that will really determine where you set your sights in your life.
Yes.
And that's essential, that we set sights for ourselves, that we have a vision for our life, that we can say there's a bright future, at least for me. If humanity, who knows? But we need to have that.
Yeah.
And the myths can give us that.
I think so, and I love this idea of seeing the world mythically, orienting yourself and standing in myth, not just being interested in it, but living myth. I think that step is crucial, because like you said, it links you and sets you on a trajectory and allows you the momentum to grasp out your goals, right, and what you want to do. One of my teachers really taught me, Josh Paquette. He really taught me don't just read the stories, right? Live the stories. I remember on a camping trip that we all went on, he told us the story of the Handless Maiden, and it is a fantastic story, just incredible. And he tell it us in parts throughout the night, and at one part, we get to the scene where the woman, the young girl, gets her hands cut off, and it's a really like symbolic representation. She's no longer to touch the external world, right? She can no longer have connection to the outer world, right? And the next morning, we all went to a burn site here in Colorado. Horrible fire swept through millions of acres, maybe not millions, but thousands of acres. I don't want to sound incorrect. Were burnt, right? And we went to a site where it was literally you would step and just up to your knees in ash, right? Wasteland that you're talking about. And he encouraged us to walk around with our hands behind our backs as if we were living the myth, right? And I think that that's crucial, because I think that when you start looking through the mythic lens, your soul wakes up and it remembers its volition. You know, like why are we here? What is our work? What's the work to get done and to do, and how do I have the energy to do it? And I think it's through myth that really has helped me remember what my soul's volition is.
Yeah, beautifully said. And it's worth remembering that our science too paints the most mystical tapestry. I mean, quantum mechanics, that is same thing the Buddha said, all is fire, all is shimmering energy. Our cutting edge physics says the exact same thing. Yes. I mean, just looking through that lens, it is a magical, mystical world that we're in. And this whole trap that we've fallen into of the material and the depression of it, it is impossible to just do the dealings of the day, the mundane routines, and have the heart lit up, you know, without it being connected first in some way to just, it's like we've decided, wow, life is bad and terrible and there's just no light in it, and then we just go about as though that were true, and that's not true. And that's a big part of rewilding, is that we are not seeing things clearly. We're not seeing ourselves clearly, we're not seeing the world clearly, we're not seeing reality clearly. And it's holding at least that much with clarity. And it's saying, all right, my perceptions are limited. I'm not going to take as solid what is partial. So however vast or small I think I am, I'm more than that.
Yeah, right.
Whatever, you know, I think of the world is not that. You know, realizing I don't have access to truth. I'm not seeing clearly, so I'm not making these things concrete, and then letting my mind, through that false narrative and false story, make me fall into a place of not thriving. You know, it's like there is this huge narrative that it's very hard for a lot of people to shake, that human beings are just bad and wrong and a cancer on the planet. That is so deep for so many of us, and that's not real, that's not true.
Right.
That there are examples of us behaving in such a way, but that's not essence truth. We can be behaving in a completely different way. We can be such agents of positivity and light, like we literally can't believe. But we can start with having these models and things that help us to revitalize ourselves. I think it's important to not wait on institutions to change. It's important not to wait on the larger picture, whatever that is, to say, you know, unless the world is okay, I'm not going to be okay. You're never going to be okay in that case, you know? So it's like, this is life happening right here, right now. If we are the microcosm, why are we less important? Why are we abdicating, you know, living our life until something else changes? Makes no sense. How do we have a clearer perception of ourselves such that we realize that it makes a difference how we are with each other? You know, simple acts of kindness, being with someone, or just limiting the acts of spreading negativity. You know, we have such a vast influence on each other, and just being able to go through the day with kindness, with presence, with correctness, with right relation, makes a huge difference.
Mm-hmm.
Makes a huge difference.
It's so it's so funny because you read it and you listen, and you have conversations about that. It's so simple, right? Just like, come on, have the what is it, the mind of Buddha and the heart of Christ, and it's like, all right, I'll go out on my day, and as soon as someone cuts you off, right? As soon as someone cuts you off, it's just like, fuck Christ, fuck Buddha, fuck that guy, And so it's, how do you protect that flame when as soon as you walk out, the world is nothing but wind trying to blow it out? So what are ways that you remember?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a good question. Um, I mean, a part of it is just having that be an active practice of remembering through the day. It could be through a mantra, it could be through little grounding techniques, getting back in the body. Having a practice is really helpful for me. Having a meditation practice, having a writing practice, so I'm journaling and I'm remembering and I'm interacting and digesting the last days, so I'm not just accumulating. We take in so much information, and how much of it are we processing like in real time or the day after? So I like to start my morning just everything just flowing out, everything that was stuck in me from a dream or from yesterday, just get it out. And so I'm there and I'm seeing myself, I'm seeing my state, and I can be, I haven't slept well, let me be extra mindful, let me really try, And so it's a practice of taking time outs, and like yesterday I was in the city, okay, I was going around, getting on the bus and out of the bus and finding it, this stress that's generating that. So removing myself from everything, going to a park, taking my shoes up, grounding, like literally having my feet on the ground, sitting, dropping into a little bit of a meditative space, reflective space. Like I was at a protest and I was in a mindful state and just going around, just looking and just noticing, that state. And yeah, sometimes it is like the righteous anger or the wrathful, correct response that shifts things. But it was just noticing and just reflecting in my mind, how would it be if we had all, like the 100+ people there, if we all just sat and collectively gathered ourselves, and not coming from that reactive mind, but coming from a mind of more grounded, centered kind of lucidity, and in that way, we make our statement. This is so not right. What's happening in the culture, it's so ridiculous and it's so disgusting. It's so disrespectful, and at the same time, is there a way that we can collectively make this statement? I mean, these people didn't just drop down from below. Somehow they got into power, and somehow it's all connected. And so the mystery element of that is hard to contemplate because the disgust is so great, But at the same time, what is it that perpetuates everything, And if the mind is in confusion, then confusion is natural. And so how can we make our statements? How can we be correct with each other? And how can we not use methods that we don't want to see in the end result to get us to some place that then, it's like there is no time. So if we shift the leaders who are there at this moment, and we don't shift the roots of how they got there, well, the tumbleweed just goes down the road, and another face comes on. So, and this isn't like, we gotta wait the thousands of years for the collective to actually wake up, but it's in the small interactions of you and me and the other people that we interface with that, we can be there.
Right.
And we can be, we were talking about what does universe mean? The one song, that we are each a small piece, a word maybe, or just a sound in it. And what is the sound that I want to be? What is the word that I want to be? My contribution to the history of the world. What would I like my word to be?
Wow, that's really good. I really like that question. What do you want your word to be? And I love this realization. You know, I think I always, for some reason, protests, there's something about it. I'm just like, man, everyone's heart is in the right place. That's a good thing. Something about them that's always kind of bothered me. I've just always been just a little turned off from them. And I'm not, you know, wagging my finger at anyone that goes and protests or anything, but I just think that it's not. It feels like it's not going to solve anything. It just feels like it's inflammatory. And I'm such a clinical herbalist. So I'm always just like, all right, why is there inflammation? Okay, okay, it's because we're eating shit, right? It's just we're feeding each other shit, and we're speaking shit to each other, and it's causing this systemic inflammation. So we need to change. Everything needs to change, it's like, well, you can't just snap your fingers and like all of the millions of people in America are gonna change, or the billions of people across the world are going to change, or whatever. But you really start with your community, right? You start with yourself and you start with your community. And I think it's hard for the human mind to comprehend, because you're like, that's not going to do anything. And I hate that attitude, because it's like, okay, well, you're just you're summoning that into being, first of all, right? You're just immediately writing it off, like, that has no purpose here. It has to be this big performative event to like have people look at it. But I don't know. I don't think it has to be like that. I really do think that it is a very community centered beginning. And I get it. You know, things are bad. People are dying. Like it sucks, right? But man, it's just, you got to start somewhere, and I really do think it starts with your neighborhood, with your neighbors. You know, when's the last time someone like knocked on their neighbor's door and was just like, "Hey, do you want to have dinner together? Do you want to cook together?" That's so unheard of within the American culture. Someone did that, they'd be like, "Get the fuck away from me," right? And they'd be really creeped out. That's a problem, right? That's an issue that I think that it would behoove us to focus on.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, the local, but also where the hearts are opened. Like, I'm reminded of this movement in England called Incredible Edible, and 400 other towns replicated their model of building raised beds in front of the police station and the community college, and volunteering every week. You get a free meal and you socialize with people, and anyone can go pick things. You know, there's perennials there, there's annuals, and that's sustained through time. The BBC came through when I was there. They were on a huge documentary. 1 million people in France went to the movie theater to see that documentary that they were a part of, you know? And so that model, I was able to meet and had the great fortune of speaking with some of the people who created that. And I said, how on earth did you do this? It just seems impossible, impossibly huge. And they said, look, we were 4 people who were sitting in a cafe talking to each other about how concerned we were about the future and about ecology and the planet. And we said, what can we do? And we had no idea what we could do. So we said, what if we say that? So they went on their social media and they said, we are 4 people concerned about the future and ecology. If you are also concerned about these things, come to this cafe at this time. And 50 people showed up.
4 turns to 50.
And this person had land, and this person knew gardening, and this person knew grant writing, and this person knew, and this person, and so like this. It wasn't necessarily like, oh, my neighbor, you know, like, I gotta connect because he's next door, she's next door.
Right.
But it's like, we send out the message, hey, this feels like it's lacking. What if we bring it into the world? Does anyone else feel that lacking? Does anyone else want to help bring that into the world? Like this podcast, like this, you know? So it's kind of like finding who resonates most and then building out from that.
That's so good, because I love that it immediately starts from a place of truth and authenticity, where it's just like, you know, we all do this, right? We get so hung up on like, oh, I want this to be like this, and I want this to be like, if it's not like this, then who's gonna give a shit, right? And it's just like, they're literally just like typing it out, like, we're four people, this is what we think, what do you think? And it immediately comes from a place of just compassion, concern, and authenticity. And that's a good mixture. I like that.
Yeah. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And to see it sustained through time, you know, because it's coming from people's hearts, you know. Mm-hmm. It's really feeding the heart, you know. And that could be a nice note to wrap up on.
Yeah, I think that it felt good, right? It felt like a good closing container.
Beautiful. Well, Cody, thank you so much for doing this. Bro. I really appreciate it. And let's see, who knows what emerges and everything like that. But this has been something in my heart for a long time. So I really thank you for coming along on the journey.
I appreciate it. It's been something that's on my heart as well. So I appreciate you asking me, and happy to chat. You know, that's great.
Beautiful. Boom. Nice. Done.